نستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. Now in last week's lesson we were looking at verse number 11 of Surah Al-Baqarah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, that these munafiqeen, these hypocrites, when their secret was exposed, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions found out that these people who were claiming to be believers when they were with the Muslims, or outwardly when they were claiming to be believers, however inwardly they had kufr inside, they had beliefs which constitute kufr, which constituted disbelief. So it was said to them that la tufsidu fil ard, that do not cause disorder, do not cause mischief on earth. Upon which these munafiqeen, these hypocrites replied by saying, innama nahnu muslihun, that we are not causing any disorder, we are not causing any mischief or any fitna or anything like that. However, we are just reforming people, that we are either reforming ourselves or we are either reforming the other people. Upon which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from verse number 12 replies by saying, أَلَا إِنَّهُمْ هُمُ الْمُفْسِدُونَ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ, that beware, it is they who are causing the disorder, it is they who are causing the fitna and the fasad and the mischief. However, وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ, they are not aware of this, they do not know of this. Now in last week's lesson I mentioned that what is mentioned or what is meant by the word la tufsidu here. Now what does it mean, do not cause fitna, do not cause mischief and so on. Now la tufsidu fil ard here means their action or their two-facedness, their lying and their deception. That when they were with the Muslims, they said to the Muslims that we are one of you. Whenever Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam needed men for various battles, for various expeditions, these people would volunteer and they would even put their life on line. However, when they were with their disbelievers, when they were with their friends, their comrades, they would conspire with them. They would tell the disbelievers of all the secrets, of all the inside out of the Muslim, and they would conspire with the disbelievers so that they can attack the Muslims later. So the la tufsidu fil ard is indicating to this sort of mischief and to this sort of disorder. Now the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, they reply to the Muslims and they say that innama nahnu muslihun, that we are not causing any fitna, we are not causing any disorder. Now the question is that why did they say that we are not causing any disorder, however we are reforming people? Now the reason is that these munafiqs or these hypocrites thought to themselves that stealing or killing people, committing zina and adultery, that is mischief, that is fitna, that is fasad. That is what is meant by la tufsidu fil ard, that is what is meant by do not cause disorder on earth. And what they were doing, these munafiqs were thinking that what they were doing is a bit of harmless fun, as mentioning later, as we're going to come later, innama nahnu mustahzi'un, that they thought to themselves that we are having a bit of fun here, a bit of a game, that one side, or when we're with the Muslims, we claim to be Muslims, and when we're with the disbelievers, we claim to be disbelievers. It's like sometimes like you get these people that with one group of people, they will try to be with them, be sweet with them, then with another group of people, they try to be sweet with them, and to them, these kind of politics and so on, they like it. So similarly, these munafiq, these hypocrites thought to themselves that, we're not doing anything bad here, we're not like committing adultery, we're not like thieving from people, we're not like, for example, killing people unjustly. What we're doing is just a bit of harmless fun, a harmless game, where with one group of people we pretending to be them, and with another group of people we pretending to be them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies by saying that no, what they are doing, this two-facedness, this trickery, this deception, this lying, what they are doing is in fact humul mufsidun, that they are the one who are in fact spreading the disorder, and they are the one who are spreading the mischief and the fitna. Now the question arises with regard to the commentary of this particular verse, that just looking at it in a generally, if you ask a person that what is more worse, committing zina or killing people or stealing from someone, or like for example deceiving someone, and generally speaking people will say, stealing someone is more worse than deceiving someone. Generally speaking, people will say that committing adultery is more worse than deceiving someone and being double-faced with someone. Committing adultery, stealing, killing people, that is more worse. So why is it that in this particular verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that no, what you're doing, the deception, the lying, the double-facedness, that is even worse than the crimes which you think to be disorder, like adultery, thieving, kidnapping, mugging people. That is even worse than that. Now scholars of the Quran, i.e. the Mufassirin of the Holy Quran, they have written that with regard to these crimes, adultery, stealing, thieving, committing zina, kidnapping people, mugging people and so on, there's a punishment for them. There's a punishment for them in the Islamic Sharia, in the Islamic penal system, which are used to act as a deterrent for people or to prevent people from committing those crimes. So I'll give you an example, as all of you know, I touched on this particular topic before. Like if a person steals, then there is a punishment according if certain criteria and guidelines are found, i.e. the object he stole was more than 10 dirhams, and if he had stolen it from a secure place, then the punishment is that such a person's hand will be cut off and will be chopped off. If a person, say, commits zina or adultery, then again, if certain conditions are found, in particular, the main one is that if he is, or if the boy and girl, or if the man and woman, if they are not married, then they will be lashed 100 times, and if they are married, then they will be stoned to death. And there's other punishments which obviously is coming up in the Holy Quran and which I discussed and talked about before. Now, these punishments, like zina, thieving, adultery, killing people, there's a punishment for them. So if a person, say, for example, was to, just say in a particular area, you have people who are habitually committing zina, then you've got the punishment there, and these punishments will act as a deterrent to stop and prevent that person from committing the zina, from committing adultery, from thieving, from stealing from people. However, what the hypocrites were doing, there's no punishment for that. How can you stop a person from being from deceiving people? How can you stop a person from being two-faced? How can you stop the hypocrites claiming to be Muslims when they are with the Muslims, and then when they are with the disbelievers, the kuffar, they reveal the true identity, and that is that they are, or they have kufr inside their heart. So how can you stop that? Lying, you could obviously mention the punishments in the hereafter, but you have to remember that these hypocrites, they don't believe in the hereafter. So how can you stop that? And there's no way of stopping it. You can't say, for example, there's no punishment to stop that. For zina, for adultery, for killing people, for stealing, there's a punishment for that. And these punishments act as a deterrent so that they refrain from committing those acts. However, a person who is two-facedness, a person who is deceiving people, a person who is tricking people, there is no legal punishment for that. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that the actions they are committing, that is even worse than committing zina. That is even worse than stealing and thieving from people. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes on verse number 12 that Allah innahum humul mufsidun, that beware it is they who are spreading the disorder, beware it is they who are spreading the mischief and the fitna, walakin la yash'urun, and they are not aware of it. So that is the reason why, or that is the answer why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this particular verse has considered their actions to be close or to be similar as those who are creating or those who are making fitna and spreading fitna and mischief and disorder on this earth. Now the next verse, verse number 13 of Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسِ. Now from verse number 13, again, another evil trait of these hypocrites is brought to the attention to the Muslims and to the reader of the Holy Quran. And that is that when it was exposed, when the truth came out that these people are in fact hypocrites, that they are in reality not Muslims, they were just claiming to be Muslims verbally, however in their hearts they had beliefs which constituted kufr and disbelief. So the Sahaba, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said to these hypocrites that, okay, forget what happened before. What you did before, okay, we will consider you to be forgiven, meaning that, we try to interpret your actions before, meaning that it could have been so that because of some kind of financial gain, you may have to become a munafiq or a hypocrite. It could be so that somebody, a disbeliever, may have forced you to be a hypocrite. Because sometimes there were many occasions, which inshallah we'll look at later, where sometimes the person, he didn't want to be a hypocrite, but somebody else forced him that, look, pretend to be a Muslim, and their inside information, come and tell it. So the Sahaba, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that, okay, what has happened before, forget it. We found out now that you're a hypocrite, you're a munafiq, and whatever actions you did before, obviously they're not going to be accepted and so on. The various battles you participate with the Muslims, they're not going to be accepted. The namaz is not going to be accepted. So just forget all about that. Do tawbah and istighfar. And then what did the Sahabas and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say to them? That وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا. That when it was said to them, now believe. Aminu, now become true believers. Kama amana an-nas, the same way the Sahabas believed. Now the word an-nas literally means people, but here, according to the consensus of all the scholars and the ulamas, the word an-nas here means the Sahaba. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, that is narrating the words of the companions and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when it was said to these hypocrites, Aminu kama amana an-nas, that believe as the Sahabas had believed, that become that staunch believers, become or reach the level of Iman as the Sahaba ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in had. So Aminu kama amana an-nas. So the hypocrites replied by saying, Anu'minu, qalu anu'minu kama amana sufaha. That shall we believe as the fools have believed. Na'uzubillah. That the hypocrites, they call the Sahabas fools. That they say that shall we become believers, shall we accept the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, shall we believe in Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the same way these fools, as-sufaha is the plural for safih, which means fools and stupid people, as these fools have believed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replied by saying, Ala innahum humus sufaha'u walakin la ya'lamun, that beware, it is they who are the fools, it is they who are the stupid people, it is they who are the silly people, walakin la ya'lamun, however they do not know of this and they are not aware of this. So from verse number 13, as I just kind of explained very briefly, that this verse again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indicating that, look, ad-deenun nasiha, the deen is full of advice. So when their mistake was appearable to everyone, when their truth was exposed, so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the companions, they gave them an opportunity, they gave them a chance. And they said that, okay, forget what's happened before, now try to believe, aminu, create in your heart the belief equivalent to the belief of the Sahabas and the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Upon which these hypocrites replied by saying, Anu'minu kama amana sufaha, that shall we believe, shall we become Muslims, shall we become believers, the same way as these fools, these stupid people became believers. Now from verse number 13, the topic which can be extracted from this particular verse is with regards to the Sahaba. And in particular, talking or slandering the Sahabas and the companions. The other verse in the Holy Quran where he talks about the virtues of the Sahabas, so obviously under those verses and ayat we'll be looking at the virtues of the Sahabas. But under this particular topic, we'll be looking at the severity of saying bad things about the Sahabas. Talking ill of the Sahabas, like these hypocrites were doing. They were calling the Sahabas fools and stupid people for becoming believers and for accepting Iman and accepting the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and believing Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now, there are many places in the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word radiyallahu anhum wa radu an to describe the Sahaba, to describe the companions. And radiyallahu anhum wa radu an means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy with them and they are happy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, there are other places in the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed this group of people Jannah and paradise. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that for this group of people, there will be a Jannah, there will be paradise for them, and in this paradise there will be like gardens, and in these gardens there will be like rivers which will flow different kinds of water like milk, honey and wine, and people will drink from it, and they will be given hura'in, they will be given heavenly wives, and khalidina fiha abada, and they will live there forever and ever and ever. Now the question we need to look at, or the issue we need to look at, is that why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's happiness has descended upon this particular group of people? That what is it, or what job, or what kind of things which these Sahabas, which these companions would do, which made Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happy? And why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has basically guaranteed them Jannah and paradise in this world? Now, the main reason, or there's many reasons, but just going to look at a few. The first reason, or you could say the main reason, is that these Sahabas, they sacrificed their life, their wealth, their family for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for the sake of deen. And there are many stories, if you open Fazaila Amal, Hayatu Sahaba, many stories talking about the sacrifice of these Sahabas, talking about the wealth which they gave to charity, talking about the way they sacrificed their family just for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And even like there were occasions where when they weren't even in the battlefield, but even then when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam needed them, they were ready to sacrifice their life. And an example which comes to my mind will be of just before the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which happened in 6th Hijri, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did Bay'at Rizwan, the pledge of Rizwan. And just very briefly, what happened was that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he saw in a dream that he was performing Umrah around the Baytullah. Remember, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at that time had migrated to Medina Munawwara, so he's in Medina Munawwara, and he sees in a dream that he's performing Umrah of the Baytullah. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells his Sahabas, and 1400 of them, they leave Medina Munawwara and they make their way towards Mecca. Now, when they were about to enter Mecca, what happened is that the disbelievers, the Quraysh, they prevent them, they stop them from entering Mecca. It's a long story, but what happened was that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sent Sayyiduna Uthman radiyallahu anhu as a messenger to go and tell the people of Quraysh, to tell the people of Mecca that we haven't come here to fight, we haven't come here to wage a war or a battle or anything like that, but we've actually come here to do Umrah, and then after that we leave. So while Hazrat Uthman radiyallahu anhu was in Mecca, a rumor spread that the Quraysh, the disbelievers, they had martyred Sayyiduna Uthman radiyallahu anhu. They had killed Sayyiduna Uthman radiyallahu anhu. So what happened was that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, under the tree of Rizwan, he calls all the Sahabas, all 1400 of them, and he does a bay'ah, he takes a pledge, and the pledge was on death, al maut, meaning that they would fight the kuffar, they would fight the disbelievers to take revenge for the blood which was shed for Sayyiduna Uthman radiyallahu anhu, even if they were to be killed, even if their life was at risk. So that is a great example where nothing happened, they didn't even have to go for a battle, and obviously, as you know, later on it was found out that this was actually a rumor, it was a lie, and it wasn't true. But in that instant, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam needed them, they were ready to sacrifice their life. And there's other examples of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam needing money for any expedition, Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu would donate all his wealth to charity. So many examples of their sacrificing, so many examples of what they were always gave Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and their deen priority over their family, over their children, and so on and so forth. So this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has classified them as radiyallahu anhum wa radu an. Another reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may be happy with them is, when we look at it, it is because of the Sahaba, it is because of the companions Islam spread to all four corners of the world. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, if the Sahabas thought to themselves that, okay, let's just stay in Medina Munawwara and just stay in Makkah and that's it, then Islam wouldn't have spread. But as soon as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, many Sahabas, they went to other places. And through their dealing, through their conduct, through their akhlaq and so on, that particular place or that particular country became a Muslim country. And the Sahabas, they managed to establish their Islamic monarchy and an Islamic state in those particular countries. That's why we see, that many places away from Arabia, even like to the far east, like China and so on, you will still find like graves of the Sahabas. Even in Kashmir, you will also find graves of the Sahabas still there, even then. Even now, because the Sahabas had migrated to those places. Even if you look at Samarkand, which is a place in Uzbekistan, many of the Hanafi scholars, like the author of Hidayah, Imam Muruqinani rahmatullah alayh, he's from Uzbekistan. Now you may be thinking that Uzbekistan and Medina Munawwara, where's the link? The link is that after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, the Sahabas, they must have went to these kind of places, Samarkand and Uzbekistan and all these places, and that's how Islam spread to these parts of the world. So that is another reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy with them. And a third reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy with them is because through the Sahaba, we know about the Sharia. Through the Sahaba, we know about the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had passed away, if the Sahabas didn't narrate or relate a particular hadith, then we wouldn't have known any Sunnahs of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We wouldn't have known that when you enter the masjid, you should enter with the right foot. Or when you enter the toilet, you should enter with your left foot. We wouldn't have known that. But it's because the Sahabas, they had transmitted, they have narrated these narrations and traditions from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They have said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he entered the toilet, he would enter with his left foot and so on. Because of this way of these narrating and these transmissions, we know of the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's many other reasons, but these are the three main reasons why we should always love the Sahabas, we should always respect the Sahabas. Now going back to the topic which can be deduced from this particular verse, and that is like talking bad or saying bad about the Sahabas. Now, before I start, just mention a hadith just to show the greatness of these Sahabas. Like for example, the hadith of Sunan al-Tirmidhi narrated by Sayyidina Jabir bin Abdullah radhiyallahu anhu, that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that fire would not touch a person who saw me or who saw a person who saw me. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that the fire, Jahannam, would not touch a person who saw me, i.e. a Sahaba. Because a Sahaba, he saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so a fire would not touch him. And similarly, a fire would not touch a person who saw a person who saw me. Meaning the fazail of the tabi'in, the predecessors. Because obviously the predecessors, they have seen the Sahabas. So because of the Sahaba have seen Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what will happen is that the tabi'in would also be, they would not feel or they would not get punished or they would not be sent to Jahannam. Why? Because of them seeing the Sahabas, and the Sahaba seeing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they are also included in that virtue and in the fazail as well.
Alright, but the sound of it behind me is that I come to.
So that is one particular hadith of Sunan al-Tirmidhi indicating towards the virtues of the Sahaba. Now as I was saying, with regards to talking ill or saying anything bad about the Sahabas, it comes in a hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, where the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that no one should say anything bad about the companions, that no one should speak anything bad or slander about the companions. Why? Because if any one of you were to spend as much gold equivalent to the amount of Uhud, meaning that if you were to spend gold or anything, if you were to give anything for sadaqah or charity, which is equivalent to the mountain of Uhud, then it would not be equivalent to a mud or half a mud which a Sahaba gives for charity. Okay, meaning that you could like spend as much as you want, but it would not be equivalent to a mud, which is around approximately 2.5 kilograms, would not be equivalent to 2.5 kilograms of what they spend, or half of that what they spend, indicating that you could do as much thawab, much good actions as you can, but you're not going to reach the level of the Sahaba. But the main part, or the first part of the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam quite clearly saying that do not slander, do not talk anything, do not say anything bad about the Sahaba. Now, looking at this particular ruling in the fiqh issue, that if a person slanders or says something bad about the Sahaba, what is the ruling? Now, firstly, before I mention the exact ruling, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahmatullah alayhi has written that a person who slanders the Sahaba or who talks bad about the Sahaba, then that person's iman is in doubt. Meaning that if a person talks bad about a Sahabi, about a companion, then that person's iman will be in doubt, or his iman is in doubt, that whether he's still a Muslim or whether he has become a kafir. Imam Muslim rahmatullah alayhi, who's written, as you know, the famous book of hadith Sahih al-Muslim, has said that a person who talks bad about a Sahabi, who talks ill of a Sahabi, who slanders a Sahabi or a companion, he has become a zindiq. Now, zindiq in hadith terminology means a hypocrite. Now, obviously, the word munafiq is generally used in the Holy Quran to describe a hypocrite, but in hadith terminology, the word zindiq is used to describe a hypocrite. So, from these two scholars, we can see how severe it is to say, talk bad or slander about a Sahaba. That to talk bad about him, to say anything bad, then according to Imam Ahmad, he says that that person's iman is in doubt. Whereas Imam Muslim rahmatullah says that that person, he becomes a hypocrite and he becomes a zindiq. Now, in the Hanafi school of thought, with regards to this particular masla, the first issue was that just basically the first part of the ruling was to go against the Shia, and it was said that if a person, if he swears or if he says something bad about Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu or Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, then that person becomes a kafir. So this is like the view in the Hanafi school of thought, that if a person says something bad about Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, then that person becomes a kafir. And as I said, that ruling was given in those days where there was a big kind of differences between like Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims, and you know, Shia, they don't like Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, they don't like Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu. So if a person says, so that's why the original ruling was, if a person says something bad about Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, swears at them, curses them, and you know, whatever, says anything bad or anything which is like disrespectful regarding Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, that person becomes a kafir. Whereas the other part of the ruling was, the second part of the ruling was that besides them two, if a person then says something bad about the other Sahabas, like Hazrat Uthman or Hazrat Ali or any other Sahabas, Hazrat Talha bin Ubaidullah and so on and so forth, then that person is considered as a fasik and is considered as a transgressor, meaning that he doesn't become a kafir, he doesn't become a disbeliever. However, that person, he is considered severely deviated from the straight path and is considered as an open sinner. And other schools of thought, like some Maliki scholars of the view, that if a person, if he says anything bad about a Sahabi, whether it's Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Umar, Hazrat Uthman, Hazrat Ali, or any one other Sahabas, then that person will be killed. And in the Hanafi mazhab as well, we also say that if a person, say for example, talks bad about a Sahabi, so even though he's not considered as a kafir, however, the punishment which he will receive in this world is called in Arabic ta'zir. Now, ta'zir is basically a punishment which is up to the discretion of the qazi, of the judge of the Islamic State. Meaning that if the qazi, if he wants, he can kill that person. Or if he wants, he can lash him. It's entirely up to him. If he wants, he can send him to prison and so on. It's entirely up to him. So that from these like texts and from the sayings of the various schools of thought, we can determine the severity of saying something bad about the Sahaba. That saying something bad about the Sahaba, talking ill of the Sahabas and so on, slandering about the Sahabas is such a great sin that according to some Maliki scholars, that person he's become a kafir, he's become a murtad, apostate, and he will be killed. And according to Hanafi scholars, if he talks bad about Abu Bakr regarding Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab, that person becomes a kafir. And if it's about the other Sahabas, then that person is considered as an open sinner, a transgressor, and the punishment which a person would receive is ta'zir. And what do you mean by ta'zir? It means that a person, it's up to the discretion of the Qadi that if he wants, he can implement the death penalty upon him, or if he wants, he can send him to prison, or he can do anything which is under the boundaries of the Sharia. Now, going back to the verse where I was saying, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسِ, that when it was said to these believers that believe the same way as the Sahabas have believed, so they replied by saying, قَالُوا أَنُؤْمِنُ كَمَا آمَنَ السُّفَهَاءُ, that shall we believe as the fools have believed, upon which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies by saying, أَلَا إِنَّهُمْ هُمُ السُّفَهَاءُ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, that beware, it is they who are the fools, but they are not aware of it. Verse number 14, just very quickly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again talks about another evil trait of these hypocrites and of these munafiqs. And he says that وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا, that when these hypocrites, when they would meet those who believe, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, that when they would meet the Muslims, when they would meet the believers, then they would say قَالُوا آمَنَّا, that we are believers. That we have also become believers like you. وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ, and when they are alone, khalau here means alone, that when they are alone with their shaitan. Shayatinihim here indicates towards the leaders of the kuffar, like the leaders of Quraysh, the disbelievers and so on. So here it is saying that وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ, that when these hypocrites and when these munafiqs are alone with their devils, are alone with their shaitan, and alone with their leaders of their various tribes, so they would say, Inna ma'akum, that verily we are with you. Innama nahnu mustahzi'un, that we are only making fun out of them, we are only mocking them. So just what I've been explaining before, that this is like the true thing which they would do, or this is like the main thing which they would do. This is why they are called hypocrites. That is that when they are with the believers, they would claim that we are also believers like you. And when they are with the disbelievers, when they are with the leaders of the disbelievers, they would say that, don't worry, we haven't become Muslims. Instead, we are still with you. Inna ma'akum, innama nahnu mustahzi'un, and we are only mocking them, and we are only making fun out of them. Now, with regards to verse number 14, a point here which I'd like to mention, this is quite a very important point, and even though it is used to describe or interpret this particular verse, but this particular point or state can be used for Muslims as well. Now, a question may arise from this particular verse number 14 is that when these people, hypocrites, when they were with the Muslims, they claimed that we are Muslims like you. And when they are with the disbelievers, then they are saying that we are disbelievers and so on. Now the question arises that why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, send azab from the sky and finish them off? Obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is our belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever powerful, is the all powerful and so on, and nothing is difficult for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when these hypocrites, when we look at it, they were like making fun out of Islam. Like, outwardly they were claiming to be Muslims, and then inwardly they had belief which constituted kufr. So why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send azab and finish these hypocrites and finish them off? Now the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't do this, in Islamic terminology, this is called istidraj. Now istidraj basically means where a person is doing something bad and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him some time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him respite so that he can sort himself out. He can do tawbah, he can do istighfar from what he is doing. However, if this person gets overconfident, he gets a bit cocky and he starts like doing it more, then when the azab and when the punishment comes, the punishment will be so severe that it will be for all the actions which he had done before. I'll give you an example. And as I said, this state of istidraj happens to many Muslims. And we think of it to be something good, but in fact it is actually the azab and the punishment has just been, like you could say, forgiven just for the time being, or there's a respite in the punishment. Now, example I'll give you. You just say, for example, there's a person, and he's got a wife and everything, and then he meets a girl. So obviously one thing leads to another, and he ends up sleeping with this girl. So he does the act of zina once, and then that is obviously, as I said, that is a grave sin, zina. So, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted, he could have given a punishment. Now, punishment doesn't necessarily have to be like from the sky. It could be anything, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have exposed that sin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have, exposed that sin in such a way where his wife finds out, his family members find out, everybody finds out, and that person is degrading the community. But what happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hides that sin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala conceals it. And what happens is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now waits for this person to see his next move, that whether he's going to do tawbah from this, or whether he's going to do istighfar from this. If he does tawbah, istighfar, that what he did was a big mistake, he does tawbah and so on, and then he forgets about this girl, and then he goes back to his wife, and they live happily ever after. But if this person now thinks to himself, he gets overconfident and thinks to himself, look, I did zina with this woman once, no one found out, my wife didn't find out, my parents didn't find out, my family didn't find out, none of the community members found out. So what I'll do next week, I'll do the same thing again. Next week he goes and does the same thing. Then after, when he's done the same sin, he thinks to himself that, look, again, I haven't been caught by anyone, my wife doesn't find out, hasn't found out, my parents, my family, they haven't found out, no one knows, I'll do it again. He keeps on doing it, until a time will come when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send the punishment. And the punishment will be that this sin of him being unfaithful to his wife, him being committing adultery and having an affair with someone, that will become exposed. And when that sin is exposed, then what will happen is his wife will leave him, his parents, everyone, his family will look down upon him, the community will find out that this person, he committed zina and his wife left him, and this person is ashamed, and this person is basically looked down upon by the whole community. That is known as istidraj. And there are many examples. You could even look in your life that you may be doing something, and then you think to yourself that I'm actually you get a bit overconfident and you think that, I'm actually special, I haven't got caught here, and then you start doing it. Okay, that depends. If that person ends up doing tawbah afterwards and istighfar, then that state istidraj can be a way of blessing for that person. Okay, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't sent the punishment there and there. But if that person carries on doing it, he gets overconfident, he still commits sins and so on and so forth, then that istidraj could be very dangerous, in that when the azab comes, when the punishment comes, then that punishment will be for all the actions which he had done. So this is what I'm trying to say with regards to this particular verse here. That the munafiqs, what they were going through was something called istidraj. And it comes in other places as well, that they were saying to other believers that, look, we are how come we haven't got caught? They were kind of making fun out of Islam. They were saying that if this is a true religion, then your God or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he knows that we are claiming to be Muslims outwardly, and inwardly we have beliefs which constitute kufr. Then why isn't it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a azab, sent a punishment? Why isn't it that we haven't got caught yet? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that this is what is istidraj, meaning that I haven't given the azab yet. I've given a respite on the azab so that you can sort yourself out. You can do tawbah and istighfar from what you have committed. However, if that hypocrite gets a bit overconfident and he thinks to himself that he's too special and so on, and he goes and he carries on living the way of life, then what will happen is that azab will come, and that is portrayed from the next verse, that the azab and the punishment will come, and the azab and punishment will be so severe, will be given to them, that it will completely destroy them. And that is mentioned from verse number 15, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu yastahzi'u bihim, that it is Allah who is mocking with them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not giving them the azab and the punishment straight away. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is kind of playing around with them. They thought that we are kind of mocking Islam. This is something very nice that we are doing this. We haven't got caught yet. Nobody knows about our deception. So they thought that this is kind of fun. They are mocking Islam. They are making fun out of Islam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies by saying that, in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making fun out of them. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted, He could have given them azab straight away. But what He does, He gives them respite in the azab so that they can do more sins, they can do more transgression, so that when the azab comes, it will be a very, very severe azab. وَيَمُدُّهُمْ فِي طُغْيَانِهِمْ يَعْمَهُونَ, which basically means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mocking with them and He has let them wander, blinding them. يَعْمَهُونَ means blinding them, فِي طُغْيَانِهِمْ, in their rebellion, that rebelling against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blinded them, meaning that it's something which we looked at before, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has covered their eyes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has covered their hearts, and nothing good about Islam, or the differentiation that this is haqq and this is batil. They've lost that capability. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finishes verse number 15 by indicating towards that point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the tawfiq to act on what has been said. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Any questions or?